If your supervisor keeps sending your findings chapter back with comments like, "This feels like descriptive," or "Where's your analysis?" it's not because you didn't work hard enough. It's because your thematic analysis has one of 5 very specific mistakes hiding in it. I'm walking you through all 5 right now with real anonymized examples so you can catch them before your supervisor does. Before we get into it, if you've got interviews to analyze and a deadline coming up, this is for you. I've helped researchers get their qualitative analysis done properly, whether they have 20 interviews or even 100 or even 40 interviews. I offer 2 main services that you can rely on to work with me. The Done For You service, where I handle the coding, theme development, and writing your findings chapter so you can submit on time without sacrificing quality. And the one-on-one NVivo or MAXQDA consulting, where I provide a focus session where we go through your data so that I can help you to start code your data and get clear themes. Both of these services come from someone with a 5-star average rating from the past clients. Links are in the description if you want to talk about your project. Now, let's get into the 5 mistakes. Mistake number 1, turning your themes into topic summaries instead of analytical constructs. Here is the trap. You finish coding, you group your codes, and you end up with theme names like challenges of remote learning or advantages and disadvantages of online therapy. They sound fine. They read like proper academic headings. But here is the catch. They are not themes. They are topics wearing themes clothing. A topic just tells the reader what participants talked about. A theme is supposed to tell the reader what it means. That's the whole difference. And it's the difference between passing and a major revision. Let me give you an anonymized example. In a study on university students studying remotely, participants kept mentioning things like losing motivation, struggling to concentrate, and not being able to separate their bedroom from their classroom. A weak analysis would group all that under challenges of remote learning and call it a day. But a strong analysis would notice that participants weren't just complaining, they were describing a specific lived experience, which is the tension between home and school that didn't exist before. So instead of the generic subtitle of challenges of remote learning, the theme becomes something like studying from the bed or tension between classwork and normal life. Those titles come straight from how participants actually talked about their experience, and they immediately tell the reader something an outsider wouldn't have known. So here is what you should do instead. Every time you name a theme, ask yourself one question. Does this label just describe what people said, or does it capture what it means? If your theme title could be swapped onto 5 other studies without changing a word, would it be too generic? Go back to your participants' own language and build the label from there. Mistake number 3, mixing inductive and deductive coding without ever telling the reader why. Quick refresher. Deductive coding means you go with codes already built from theory or your research questions. Inductive coding means you let codes emerge from the data itself. Most dissertations use a mix of both, and that's completely okay. The mistake is blending them and not highlighting it in your report or in your methodology. Here is what it would look like. A student can build an initial coding framework from their literature review, which is deductive. Then, halfway through coding, new patterns can show up that the literature never predicted. So they add new codes inductively. Nothing wrong so far. But then in the write-up, they present the whole thing as if it were one seamless, purely deductive discovery with zero explanation of which codes came from theory and which codes came inductively. Why does this matter so much? Because transparency is one of the core markers of rigor in qualitative research. If an examiner can tell which of your codes are theory-driven and which are data-driven, they can't evaluate whether your interpretive decisions actually make sense. So here is the fix. In your methodology or even in your findings chapter, be explicit. Say something like, codes related to a certain issue were developed deductively from theory, while codes related to Y emerged inductively during coding. That one sentence can signal to your examiner that you know exactly what you did. You can also say that you used a hybrid approach, which is both inductive and deductive. This will instantly make your analysis more credible. Mistake number 3, dropping quotes back to back with no commentary connecting them. You've seen this one. Maybe even your own draft has a findings section that's basically quote after quote, one after another, with barely any sentence in between. It reads more like a transcript than analysis. Here is why that fails. A quotation is not standalone evidence. Its value only shows up once you explain what it means and why you picked it first. If you just stack quotes without commentary, you're asking the reader to perform the analytical work for you. And examiners will not do that. They'll just mark it as descriptive. So imagine a participant says, I did not feel welcomed in that group. Several members kept asking about my background. They questioned my training. A weak findings section just drops that quote in and moves on to the next one. A strong findings section frames it first, something like, several participants describe feeling scrutinized rather than accepted, as illustrated by one participant. Then the quote is provided. Then there is a commentary afterward, unpacking what that scrutiny meant for the participant's sense of belonging. So the fix here is a simple three-part structure. Before the quote, orient the reader to what the point it illustrates. Then give the quote itself and keep it tight. Don't put too long of paragraphs. Then after the quote, unpack it and connect it to your theme. And if relevant, connect it to how other participants either echoed or diverged from it. That before quote and after quote pattern alone will make your findings chapter look way better and more analytical. Mistake number 4, letting percentages and words like majority do the talking instead of meaning. This one sneaks in because it feels rigorous. You write something like 75% of the participants attributed their experience to family background, or the majority of the participants felt this way, and it feels like you are being precise and scientific. Here's the problem. Qualitative research was never designed to measure prevalence. Your sample wasn't randomly selected to represent a population, so those numbers don't actually prove anything statistically, and leaning on them signals to your examiner that you don't fully understand the logic of qualitative inquiry. Worse, a theme that only 5 participants mentioned can be just as important as one that came up 20 times if what it reveals is significant. Reducing your findings to who said what most often actively buries that insight. For example, in a study on remote work during a certain period, a weak write-up says most participants reported dissatisfaction. A strong write-up might note that roughly 2/3 mentioned dissatisfaction just to give the reader context, and then spends real time unpacking how that dissatisfaction showed up differently. Some describing isolations, others burnout, others tension between caregiving and work. The number is a small contextual detail. The meaning is the actual findings. So the fix is, if you use a number at all, use it sparingly to orient the reader, never as your main evidence, and avoid vague quantitative language like majority and most unless you immediately follow up with texture of what that means. Your job is to explain how something was experienced, not how many people experienced it. So let's put all the 4 fixes together. Let's picture the same remote learning study from earlier, but written the right way this time. The theme isn't challenges of remote learning anymore, it's studying from the bed. The findings aren't organized by question. The coding approach is stated openly. So in this case, probably it would be deductive because it came from theory, and there is an element of inductive, so it could be a hybrid approach. And the write-up says also which approach was used directly. The quotes are framed before you read them, given in full then unpacked after, instead of leading with numbers and quantities. The write-up says, instead of saying 75% of participants, the write-up would say roughly 2/3 of the interviewees, which highlights what experience actually felt for the people living that experience. So that's the difference between a findings chapter that comes back with revise and resubmit and one that sails through your defense. So those are the 4 mistakes that can genuinely fail your dissertations chapter. Now, if you'd rather not fix this alone, I offer both done for you and one-on-one consulting services for NVivo, MAXQDA, and ATLAS.ti. See link in the description for all the details related to my service.